Hello everyone and welcome to Viking Preparedness, and I am not Pastor Joe Fox. I am Brother Scott Royal, and yes, in my faith we often refer to one another as brother and sister. So just kind of keeping with the flow of things. I wish everybody a happy new year and a prosperous new year, and that may you have peace in your lives. This video is the result of meetings I had with Pastor Joe Fox and some of his comms chiefs up on Shofar Mountain. This past weekend I actually drove up there and we sat and had some FaceTime with one another in order to work out communications, and that's what this video is about. Distribution for this video is going to be restricted primarily to Viking preparedness and specifically on Pastor Joe Fox's Viking Preparedness channel. I have my own YouTube channel, Canteen Cup. However, I'm not going to post this video on there. I will post other videos relating to communications on my YouTube channel and make those kind of generally available. I have a lot of information going out today, so rather than try to do everything in one video, which I think will take too long, I'm going to break it down into probably at least 3 videos total. This one being mainly geared to the group and team leaders, and I'll use those terms interchangeably, mag leader, whatever, regional coordinators, and the communicators themselves. I mean, everybody's welcome to see this, but this is specifically geared to those people. During the meetings we had on Shofar Mountain, we discussed that the normal means of communication, cell phones, text messages, Facebook, YouTube, Patreon, Twitter, and many others they're being disrupted. Now, how do I mean that disruption? Well, I mean it in a couple different ways. One is many of these companies are practicing censorship, and because they own the company, they really have that right to do that. But it is disrupting our freedom of speech, and if they don't like what we say, they either delete the comment, or they ban the originator of the comment, or they put disclaimers on there, and so our video is being interrupted. In addition to that, we have service interruptions. An example of that would be if we are like we saw recently in Nashville, where there was an explosion. And while that wasn't a terrorist attack, it was a terror type attack. And we may see more of those. In addition, our infrastructure is aging, and some of that equipment, even though it's electronic, is just wearing out. In this area, I've seen a couple service interruptions, due to equipment failure. So we are seeing that, and combining that with the need to be able to communicate, Pastor Joe had determined that we need to up our communications game. And specifically, he asked me to help coordinate that effort and to put forth this video to kind of get that ball rolling, because where we are is not where we need to be. Now, I also had the Viking Radio Network. I put out newsletters. In fact, I'm going to quote from a newsletter here in a little bit, talking about some of the things that we need to be looking at. But the Viking Radio Network was kind of geared, towards the communicators themselves. And so I'm taking this up to the next level, and I'm talking to the leaders so that they have an understanding on what to look for in a communicator and what they need to have. And then, from there we kind of go into, how to communicate. Pastor Joe often uses the acronym PACE, Primary, Alternate, Contingency, Emergency. That acronym originated in the Army Communications Program. If you look at for those of you that kind of study military stuff, you often hear the term C3. What that stands for is command, control, and communications. So communications links, secure communications links, is vital. And it's often overlooked today because we have Facebook and Twitter and emails and text messages and cell phones. But what if that goes away? And we're seeing that in splashes here and there. But, when we look at the overall political goings on, I'll call it, that all can come to a grinding halt very quickly. And we see how these movements come in and they take over. And while the world around us may change, we don't necessarily want to change with it. And so we still need to be able to operate in this environment. And it may become a non-permissive environment. You've heard that term before. And so we still need to be able to communicate. How and who do we communicate? Well, first of all, the MAG group team needs to be able to communicate amongst themselves. And that's an area I typically don't get into, especially in this video, because everybody has a different story to tell and what they use. And as long as it works for you, that's great. But now when we start talking about talking between MAGs or crews, and then between the MAGs and crews and their regional coordinator, and then between the regional coordinator and Shofar Mountain, we now have a broader spectrum and we get into a more specialized skill. And so what I want to talk about today is what some of those skills are. And this is a lot of stuff that we talked about, again, with Pastor Joe and with the comms chiefs of that area. And again, why I have this video. So going through that, like I said, I created a newsletter. In fact, this is the last one of the year, and I talked about specific requirements that a communicator should have in their group team MAG. And I'm just going to call them crews from now on. I'm getting tired of saying that. But it's important that you have at least one of these people or one of these persons. Because that person has to be able to complete a communications plan. In other words, you have to know how you talk to each other in the crew, using PACE. Then you have to be able to know how to talk to other crews using PACE. Then you have to be able to talk to the regional coordinator using PACE. And then you have to be able to talk to Shofar Mountain using PACE. And as these distances increase, so does the skill set. In rough terms, your comm chief or your communications chief or your communications sergeant should have communication skills equivalent to the MOS of 18 Echo, and that is a Special Forces Communications Sergeant. He should have similar skills. Now, I'm not talking about the whole bailiwick of the Special Forces thing. I'm talking mainly about the communications portion of it. So when you're looking for somebody, you're looking for somebody that should be a pretty skilled person, because he is going to have to operate and maintain those linkages. And if you can't do that, then you're not communicating. So I have about 8 things here I'm going to talk about. And again, I'm just going to go through these 8, and then I'll talk about in another video other things, because this is going to go a little longer than I want. Okay, first off, currently in the FCC licensing scheme for amateur radio, there are 3 classes of licenses. There is a technician, a general, and an extra. And then the advanced class, which is between the general and the extra, has been grandfathered in, but they did away with it about 10 years or so ago. So at the minimum, you need to have a general class license. And I'll do another video on how to get there, but you got to have at least a general, because that gives you HF privileges, which you need. So when you're looking for your comms chief or your comms sergeant, they either need to have a general or an extra or an advanced, or they need to plan on getting one soon, because you need that. Now, I want to put a couple caveats in there. I know people say, well, when everything goes bad, that the licensing won't matter. And that may be or probably will be true. And they can find you if they want. However, this is a skill. It is a special skill set, and you need to practice. And the only way you're going to practice today is to have a license. Now, everything we do in Viking preparedness is legal. We do not do anything illegal. So having a license is not, is not going to get into it. If you've got a guy who says, I want to be your comms chief, and he gets up there and he says, woof, 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 as Joe would say, operational security, I don't talk on the radio until it's needed, woof, woof, woof. If you have that person, you may need to think about getting another one, because you need to be talking on the radio. This is a specialized skill set. It takes skills that most people do not have. So that being said, you're looking for somebody with a license and that is active. They are participating in nets. Specifically, I think that they should be participating in HF nets, and hopefully in state or regional nets, not local nets, because it changes the complexity of the net, and the skill required to work in those environments changes as the net gets further apart. So the bottom line is, you need to be looking for somebody that is competent and capable. All right. Next, they got to have the right equipment. What does that basically mean? That they should have, at the minimum, an HF radio that is capable of producing 100 watts of power on the lower HF bands. And what I mean by that is 40 meters and 80 meters. You don't necessarily have to know what that means as a supervisor, but your comms guy should know what those means, and he should be able to tell you, yep, I can do that. So 100 watts on 40 and 80 meters, voice and digital. And we'll talk a little bit about that in a little bit. He must have an antenna sufficient to operate on those bands. And if he doesn't, he needs to get one, or you need to find another comms person. You've got to have the most simplest antenna is what they call a dipole antenna, and it's about 132 foot long. So if you don't know what you're looking at, he should have a long wire in his backyard, going out 60 something feet either way, 61, 62 feet out like this, a total of about 132 foot. And if he doesn't have that, you need to start asking questions, or you need to find another person. And I'm serious about this, because if you don't have this, when it comes time to needing it, you're not going to be able to communicate. And we are talking about communication. All right, number 3, you should also be able to operate on a digital mode. In other words, he should be able to communicate with somebody by typing on his computer and not talking on voice. And we can go more about that later. I don't have enough video time to do this. All right, he should be able to use WinLink. A WinLink is another digital mode that allows you to send emails over HF radio. He should be able to operate with emergency power. And what I mean by that is, most of the times we just kind of plug everything into the wall and the way it goes. However, if you lose that ability, you should have a backup, be it a generator or batteries or solar power, something. He should be able to do that. and operate for, at least a couple hours, and then be able to recharge his batteries and do it again. He also should be able to operate either mobile or portable HF. And what I mean by that is a mobile station means he has the radio in his car and the antenna attached to his car, and while he's driving down the road he can talk on HF. That is a capability. Portable means that he has a station that he can put in his car, take somewhere, set it up, and operate. He should be able to do one or the other. Me personally, I have a portable station. I don't do HF mobile because, well, it's a whole lot of stuff. And then the last thing is he needs to be active on radio. He needs to be, at least weekly, he should be using his equipment. He should be talking on, and I'm going to say, a regional or national HF net weekly. And if you don't know where to go, two choices are: you can go to your local amateur radio club, or he can go or she can go, or you can join AMRON, which is the American Readout Radio Operators Network, or Alpha Mike Romeo Romeo Oscar November.com. Join them and start practicing on their nets. They have the best gig going, and you'll get your training. But you need to use that equipment. If you're sitting there, if somebody's sitting there saying, well, I'm saving it for when things really happen, I've got it all stored. Radios decay sometimes sitting still. I had a radio that I didn't use for a couple of years, and when I finally brought it out and used it, it wasn't working right. I had to send it into the shop to get it repaired because I didn't know what was wrong with it. And I had some dirty contacts buried somewhere deep down in there. So you need to use your equipment and make sure it works. Again, if you get that woof, 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 what you should be hearing, oh yeah, once a week I use my primary radios, and then once a month or once every other month I take my other radios out and I test them. That's what you should be hearing. All right. And then lastly, talking on a radio, it's a skill. It is a skill that takes practice. It's not like talking on the telephone. It's not like talking on your cell phone. There's a lot of variables in there, and the only way you're going to get that practice is to practice, to get that skill. It takes years sometimes, and especially if you're gonna run a net, which is a group of radio operators all talking together. You have somebody that's in charge. It's called a net control. That takes more skill. So that's really what I got for today. I went a little bit longer than I wanted to, but this will get you started. Again, I'm going to do some other videos where I talk about how you get your licensing, and then I'll talk about some basic equipment, and I'll use my recommendations. My recommendations may not be your recommendations, but if you don't know where to go, this is a good place to start. So that's all I got. Again, my YouTube channel is Canteen Cup, and I'll put a link. But this video is only going to be on Patreon because I'm doing this for Pastor Joe and Shofar Mountain and Viking Preparedness. So that's all I got. Everybody, stay safe and stay secure, and hopefully I'll hear you out there.